the MacBook Air, the iPad Air, the Mac Studio, and the iPad. Apple released new versions of these devices this week. And on this episode of the Macworld Podcast, we're talking about what's new, what's not new, and what's totally confusing. Stay tuned. It's going to be a good one. Welcome to the Macworld Podcast. I'm Roman Loyola here with Jason Cross.
Good morning.
And Michael Simon.
Hello, sir.
This is a big week for Apple. The company released a bunch of new products, so we're going to go over them on this show. There are 4 new products to talk about. I thought we would start by talking about what I'm going to call the head scratchers.
The 16E started the head scratching. That's not what this show is about, but like there were some moves there that were like, wait, what?
I mean, it's a good place to start because by and large, these are products that we already know that got processor upgrades. These aren't wholly changed, massive.
Why don't we start with what happened today? So we're recording this on Wednesday. And so Apple released a new Mac Studio today, which I was kind of surprising, but not surprising in a way, because it was rumored that it would be released this spring, but I think we all thought it would be closer to WWDC than now. But anyways, it came out and it has a weird processor configuration.
Yeah.
Yes.
Totally weird. Yeah.
At the standard baseline configuration, it has an M4 Max, which, all right, that sounds right, because, there's an M4 Max MacBook Pro. The Mac Studio always has an M Max chip at its base. All right.
The M2 Max is the one it replaces. It was an M2 Max
Correct.
and M2 Ultra.
Yeah.
About 2 years
ago.
But
then Apple kind of threw us a curveball and said, on the high end, you get an M3 Ultra. Not an M4 Ultra, an M3 Ultra. At least for me, was a little surprising because we had kept hearing all this stuff about how the M3 is done and Apple wants to move on from it. Not necessarily, not because there was a bad chip, but because there were some production issues with it. It's kind of an expensive chip to make. But no, it's still here now with the M3 Ultra.
Like just addressing the production stuff, like the volume of this chip is going to be much smaller than like a normal.
That's true.
So like they are definitely winding down quicker than usual, the M3 cycle. But so my biggest question here, so a couple of things. Apparently Apple has confirmed to a French website, Numerama, that says the M4 Max chip doesn't have the Ultra Fusion connector necessary to make the Ultra chip. So the Ultra chip, and Jason knows this much better than I do, but it's basically two Maxes fused together, and there's a connector that tricks the system into thinking it's one chip, right?
Yeah, it's got a super fast interconnect between them. It's just 2 Max chips,
right,
on a single
literally
stratus together.
Double the M3 Max. The M3 Ultra is you take everything and multiply it by 2, and you got the Ultra. And apparently the M4 Max doesn't include the Ultra Fusion thing that it needs to create the Ultra chip.
Here's what I find interesting about that. A couple things. One, they told Ars Technica, who asked why they're doing this, hey, not every chip's going to get an Ultra, which is the first time they've said that. Like, like, really? That's new. Okay. I mean, so because they have all gotten Ultras before. The other is we kept hearing earlier that like Apple's going to change all of its servers for private cloud compute for all their AI stuff over to M4 Ultras, like later this year or whatever. And now is there not one?
Well, I guess that's M3 Ultra now, right?
Yeah, is that M3 Ultra now, or is it going to be M4 Max? Is that the better way to scale those servers, maybe? Or does M4 Ultra exist and they're going to keep them all for themselves? Like there's a version of M4 Max that doesn't have the interconnect that goes on these products, and then they're making sort of a separate server chip that's essentially the M4 Ultra, and they're just producing it for their own servers. I don't know.
Yeah. So my biggest question, like, let's assume all that is accurate, and I'm sure it is. Why not release this a year ago with M3 Max and M3 Ultra chips and not eliminate all of the confusion of generation weirdness?
Yeah, why'd they skip the sort of M3 era with the Mac Studio? So, like you said, Roman,
bring it back a year later. Two
scratching
years, has been updated in 2 years. Yeah, had this come out last May or June or March or whatever, okay, great, this is it, and we're all, it makes sense, and this is the chip, and now it's like, okay, well, now we got last year's M3 Ultra and this year's M4 Max, and this is faster than this, and where's the Mac Pro is another question. Like, what's that going to get? Nothing.
That was one of the other sort of conspiracy theories about this, is that as a way to make sure there's a differentiator, why would you buy a Mac Pro? Because we've been saying this all the time, like, now that the Mac Studio's out, like, who's the Mac Pro for? Maybe there's an M4 Ultra and it's only for the Mac Pro.
Maybe.
And then you have a reason to, if you, rather than buying a high-end Mac Studio, to buy the entry-level Mac Pro or something.
I mean, there must be something, because Apple would have just stuck the same thing, the same M3 Ultra chip in the Mac Pro, if they didn't have something at least planned. Yeah.
Or maybe there is an update coming and it's just any minute now. Like, they're just dropping web releases like crazy.
The Mac Pro doesn't. Yeah, right. That's possible, but it would be weird that they did their own day for that. But maybe the Mac Pro doesn't have Max chip, so it's just the Ultra. Apple could have quietly, just like it did with the iPad yesterday, just drop it at the end of the press release. Oh, and the Mac Pro is also available with this same chip for $7,000 or whatever it costs. But they didn't. So, like, there's very specific weird decisions being made by a whole team of people at Apple this week.
Yeah,
it is really weird that Mac Pros are stuck way back on the M2 Ultra now.
Yeah.
And we thought,
I mean, they're slower.
They'd be waiting for these M4s, but if there's not going to be an M4 Ultra, then what are you waiting for?
It's going to be M5. They're going to wait another year. Just give it an M3 Ultra for 12 months for the 7 people that are going to buy one.
Right. Maybe it's not that easy. Maybe the way that the chips connect to the rest of the system and stuff, it's not as simple as just dropping in a different chip.
Maybe, but it's still
they got to do something, because
it's a terrible value. It starts at $7,000, and it's slower than the Mac Studio at $4,000. It's crazy.
Yep. Speaking of value, it's still true that if you're looking for a desktop Mac, that entry-level Mac Studio at $19.99 is way better than buying a high-end Mac Mini, like a Mac Mini where you spend the extra $200. Yeah. You have to spend another $200 to get like the full M4 Pro CPU, like the 14 core and 20 core GPU. It comes with 24 gigs of memory. It's $400 to go to 48. That entry level Mac Studios comes with 36. That's kind of in between there. It already comes with the 512 gig SSD stuff. So you're probably, and that's a way better processor. You're talking about an M4 Max versus an M4 Pro. You're talking even the cut down version of the M4 Max, the 14 core and 32 cores GPU is way more than the 20 core GPU you get in one of Apple's few systems where you can almost just buy the entry level. If you were spending $2,000 on a computer and you only have a 512 gig SSD, you kind of have to upgrade the SSD. But other than that, you can just buy that entry level, and it's a great computer.
Jason was talking about conspiracy theories. It does feel like Apple had a plan, something happened to that plan, and then had to make a switch. It kind of feels like that. I mean, we'll never know.
But right. Well, Apple will never explicitly tell us, but yeah, it certainly seems like something got screwed up between the M3 and the M4, and this is, I don't know.
An M3 Ultra is still going to be faster than the M4 Max.
It's great, yeah.
Like, it's going to be faster than the Max. If you've got
the M4 Max, by the M4 20% or so, 20 something.
Yeah. You're going from 16 CPU cores to 28 in the cut down version of the Ultra, and from 40 GPU cores to 60. So even though those cores are a little better in the M4 generation, you're talking about more than 50% more GPU cores, more than 50% more CPU cores, doubling the neural engine, all that stuff. So it's going to be definitely a better chip, just not as much presumably as an M4 Ultra would be.
The Mac Studio also gets an upgrade to Thunderbolt 5, and I think that's basically it in terms of what's new in the new Mac Studio.
No new design, which we didn't really expect. I mean, the
Yeah.
Mac Mini got the new design, but there's not they need some cooling inside of that Mac Studio. It's not so easy to just make it smaller. So
I wouldn't expect it to be small.
The button is still in the back and not
It's
underneath.
crazy small as it is.
Yeah, yeah,
it is a pretty small machine for what it does. Yeah,
there's one under my monitor. Right?
Yeah, it's small.
So it's not. I mean, that's a Manila folder next to it. It's not a big computer for a quote like high end computer. It's tiny.
Yeah, and the price stayed the same, so that's good.
Yep.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. As Jason says, $19.99 is a really good value for.
Yeah, even though you're kind of getting the cutback version of the chip and stuff like that, it starts with 36 gigs. You just need to update the SSD because you're going to get mad about having
honestly, you could just get a Thunderbolt 5 drive in 6 months.
If you're okay with sort of external storage, just do that. Yeah.
They're a little expensive now, but they won't be by the end of the year.
You have a good number of ports and stuff, so yeah.
So why don't we talk about the other head scratcher, which happened on Tuesday, and it's with the new iPad, the iPad with an A16 processor.
So this is the replacement for the 10th gen iPad.
Yeah.
It's like about 2 years old.
The 349 iPad. Did I get the right? Is it 349 or 399?
It started out as 449 when it released, and then he cut the price $100 last year, or maybe a year and a half ago. I don't know, sometime.
So its A16 processor means it can't support Apple Intelligence.
Yeah, and it's only marginally faster than before, and you will never know. Like no one will ever be able to measure or feel the difference between the one that was on sale a week ago and the one that you buy next week.
Yeah, the difference between an A14 and an A16 is
academic.
It's academic. It's not, and it's this weird version of the A16 where it's like it's a 5-core CPU, whereas the A14 was a 6-core CPU in the 10th gen iPad. So it's like this cut back version of the A16.
They could have updated the chip a year ago and not told us, and nobody would have.
Yeah. And it doesn't. They didn't do anything. It doesn't have Wi-Fi 6E or Wi-Fi 7 or
same colors, even
cameras.
Yeah,
it's got this weird. The specs show like a 0.1 difference in screen size. Weirdly,
they call it 11-inch, and it's still only 10.867 or whatever.
Yeah, and the other one they call 10.9. I just don't know the down to the millimeter to the fraction of a millimeter. It's the exact same size and weight as the 10th gen, right? So it's literally they slapped a different chip in there that nobody's ever going to notice the performance, and it doesn't support Apple Intelligence. So why do this?
That it doesn't support Apple Intelligence.
Yeah,
everything else does. Every Mac,
every
iPhone except the iPhone 15, which will be gone
literally everything, but like
everything
Apple
new.
TV and Apple Watch, right?
Yeah. Every new Mac, iPad, and iPhone released since they announced Apple Intelligence supports it. We just assumed it was going to be a very, very minor refresh, but enough to support Apple Intelligence, and it doesn't. And it's just like, what on earth is the point of this? Like, unless they have like a whole garbage bag full of A16 chips.
Literally a garbage bag. That's how they store some. Why the A16 doesn't make any sense.
None. And it still supports the first gen Apple Pencil, which is hilarious.
Yeah, it's all the same.
Get rid of that. Yeah.
Right.
In our staff Slack, when the release was happening, I made a comment about how, what did I say? That it doesn't support Apple Intelligence. And David Price, our colleague, he basically snapped back, nobody needs Apple Intelligence. And I was like, you're right. But, how many presentations have we sat through? No, I don't disagree with that at all. But how many presentations have we sat through and like a majority of it is talking about Apple Intelligence? All of them.
Right. Yeah, it's the future.
I mean, Apple has told us time and again, this is the future. and you're going to buy a device that just was updated that doesn't support it. Yeah.
One would expect like the new version of Siri that's coming to require things that like systems that run Apple Intelligence. So like you're not going to get the new Siri, and then all the stuff we're going to see this summer about iOS 19, iPadOS 19. There's going to be all this new AI stuff, and your iPad that you bought 2 months ago isn't going to run it. It's going to be June. You're going to be looking at all these things and go like, my iPad's 2 months old.
Presumably this will be on shelves for at least a year, maybe more. The last one was 2+ years. So it's just very strange. I mean, what's the message here?
Especially when even their cheapest iPhone now, they stretched to raise the price of the iPhone to do this. So all I can think is that they see a market where this entry-level iPad is bought for schools and kids.
For kids.
Where it's where you're going to turn it off even if it had it.
But why update it at all then? Why does it need the chip at all?
Yeah, it doesn't. It really doesn't. Because it doesn't help, and it doesn't add anything else. It doesn't add more storage. The colors are the same.
Well, I think did the storage increase? I think it did.
I think it went up.
It was 64. Now it's 120.
Right.
No, it did. They didn't, but they could have done that quietly without.
Yeah, that's true. Well, no, the old one only had 64 and 256.
Yeah. Now it's 128 and 250. They could have done that.
Maybe it's about that A14 didn't have the channels, like how the connection channels to do it in
or the higher
128 gig blocks, right?
Maybe.
So it's like a 64 gig block or 4 64 gig blocks is like kind of what you get.
Yeah, maybe that's interesting.
Yeah, I don't know. It's a weird. It's a weird thing. Maybe they
if Apple
literally updated it just to make the minimum 128 gigs. So it's so weird. I'm looking. It
goes up to 512 now as well, which is also supports Jason's theory. We're gonna run with that.
It's all about the storage. Like they updated the chip just to update the storage.
The storage.
Yeah. It could be. I mean, I'm looking at like every spec is the same. Like everything, the camera, everything. Just
my response when David said that was basically, a majority of these iPads are used by kids, and kids don't need Apple Intelligence to watch Bluey. So
or play their Toka game or whatever.
Right.
And in fact, if you had Apple Intelligence, you in a child account setup or an educational account setup, you probably turn it off.
Right.
That's you don't want them talking to it and doing stuff that you may not want them to. So, I mean, I don't want to try and spin this. It doesn't run Apple Intelligence as some sort of positive. It's not. But maybe that was the logic. At least they didn't raise the price. It's not like they're forcing you to pay more and you don't get a worse system.
Sorry, Jason. The iPhone 12 and 12 mini used the A14 and did come with 128 gigs of storage.
Okay. So it's not that.
That theory is blown up. I was hoping, because that makes a ton of sense.
Yeah, so we got this $349 iPad that, doesn't support Apple Intelligence. But, it's a $349 iPad.
Yeah, no, it's great. It's fantastic. I would recommend it to anybody who wants a cheap iPad for really any reason. It's a great, fantastic tablet with a great price. And 120 gigs of storage for $350 is fantastic.
It's better, yeah.
And listen, you don't need Apple Intelligence. You really don't need it on an iPad. It's more of an iPhone thing, I think. So it's fine.
Yeah, at least for now.
It's just strange that they did.
Right. I think I'm sure our listeners understand this. We're harping on it because it's inconsistent with the marketing message.
That's it.
We're not harping on it because it's a bad product.
Our job is to point out inconsistencies in Apple's marketing.
Yeah, we're just scratching our head about why they updated it at all when it's not going to be different for anyone. Like, why they didn't just like raise the storage amount and just be done. I mean,
I tell you what, if you could find an old one, 10th gen one for like $200, grab it. Even if you don't need it, just buy it.
Yeah,
it's a really good tablet.
Especially, man, if all you're going to do is if it's going to be for your kid or something and they're going to watch some streaming movies, play a couple of kids games, you don't need more than 64 gigs.
Right.
You're fine. Just get some, clearance version of the entry level 10th gen iPad.
Yeah, I mean, it's already always on sale for like $279 or $299, but if it drops even further to like $229 or something like that, it's a great deal.
And what a leap there is now between the iPad and the iPad Air to the M3. It's just
So that's a good segue because Apple released a new iPad Air and it has an M3 chip, which, as I think I alluded to in the beginning, I thought the M3 chip was dead and gone.
Yeah.
Well,
it still lives on.
I think this is another situation. So the M3 in the iPhone, not the iPhone, the M3 in the MacBook Air. I don't know why I said iPhone. That's weird. The M3 in the MacBook Air had either an 8-core GPU or a 10-core GPU. All the other ones had 10-core GPUs. The one they're selling in the iPad Air has a 9-core GPU, which I think this is another garbage bag situation where they just have a ton of these lying around.
Yeah,
that didn't reach the 10-core thing.
It's a binning situation where they're just like, all right, well, what can we do?
So I think this is a stopgap to the M4 that comes out, this time next year, maybe earlier, even if they're
unlike Macs, you can't like choose a version with more cores enabled or anything like that. So this is what you get.
That's another situation where it's the exact same iPad as last year.
And they can't
know, it's the difference.
They can't make it have an M4, but then why are you buying an iPad Pro?
Sure.
Like HDR, I guess.
Well, the OLED screen.
Right. It's the display, but not a lot of people care enough on an iPad to spend that kind of money. So, but there's a big gap in price. There's a big gap in features and performance and all this other stuff going from an iPad to an iPad Air.
Yeah, it's almost double. I mean, it's
huge.
Close. Yeah.
And just ongoing. I mean, you have Apple Intelligence now, but then once we see what WWDC rolls around, we're going to see all this stuff that they're going to say is part of iPad OS. And then when we see the fine print, it's going to be, only all those ones that run Apple Intelligence, all the 8 gig and higher RAM models.
Yeah. And the price did not change on that iPad Air as well. So I was kind of thinking maybe we would see price increases this year, but for multiple reasons, that doesn't seem to be happening. There's still the second half of the year. But so that iPad Air is now out.
There's a new Magic Keyboard for the iPad Air, which is the first. I'm nearly certain it's the first one built specifically for the iPad Air. You could use the iPad Pro's model previously, but it had like a larger camera cutout on the back. This one is specifically made for the Air. It's a little bit cheaper. We'll test it out, but I'm pretty sure it doesn't have backlighting, which is a little disappointing because that's like the best feature of the Magic Keyboard on the iPad Pro.
Yeah.
So they're very similar.
And the new keyboard does support the old, like if you had the M2 MacBook iPad Air.
Yeah.
Or just even going back to the 4th and 5th gen iPad Air. All the iPad Airs that have the new shape with the Touch ID button and stuff like that. It works with all those. This new keyboard.
It doesn't show in the list here the backlighting, so I'm not 100%. Like, there's no like picture of it lit up on the website, but it seems as though it doesn't have it. But anyway, it's a little bit cheaper than the one you had to buy previously, which was the older iPad Pro Magic Keyboard, which wasn't quite made for it, but they're very similar. This has the new design, the new hinge, the function row, the larger trackpad. So it's a good option.
It is a good option, but the price difference is $30. It's $269 versus $299, and you, like you said, you don't get the backlighting, which I almost think is pretty critical. It's like I use my I'm typing around a lot where it's pretty dark. It also doesn't come in black.
That's the other thing. You're right. I had written that down and I forgot to say.
The iPad Pro version comes in black. So for $30, you might want to splurge just for the backlight. For me, $30 would be worth it for the backlighting alone.
Yeah, that's probably true. The black is superior because if for no other reason that it doesn't get dirty.
Yeah. Okay.
Those keyboards are great. That new keyboard for the MacBook, for the iPad Pro and everything. Those are really
it's one of Apple's unsung heroic product. Like it's fantastic. It's very expensive. It costs as much as the new iPad,
but it feels it
excellent.
Does not feel like a tablet keyboard overlay thing. It really feels like a MacBook's keyboard and trackpad. I mean, it's not as big. The trackpad keyboard aren't as big, but they have that feel, and you can actually like really get some typing done. Whereas I feel like all the other ones felt that they had that rubbery, spongy feel. They didn't type well and stuff. I'm just like, I just use the on-screen keyboard.
And presumably, the other than the backlighting and the color, it's identical to the one from before. But that's another head-scratching decision. Like, why? Like, why are we taking away backlighting? Like, you had to re-engineer this thing to take away backlighting. Like, why?
They have the side that has the camera cutout. That's just like the side that goes up and holds the MacBook. Like the bottom plate that has the keyboard and the battery and the charging stuff that's the same. You would think it would be cheaper just to have that bottom part be the same and have the backlighting. So
I agree.
So let's talk about the last product that Apple released. Well, wasn't the last product.
This is the
last
most
product we're
straightforward.
talking about. Yeah, this is the most straightforward.
This was what we expected. Actually, better than we expected. This is not head scratching. This is head patting.
Yes. So this is the new M4 MacBook Air. It's essentially the same as the M3 MacBook Air, but now has an M4 chip. It also has a couple other new features. It has a new 12 megapixel center stage camera, which was introduced in the MacBook Pro. So we kind of were expecting it with the MacBook Air.
But Apple could have gotten away with not including it.
Yeah,
they didn't have
to. They could have, yeah. And then it also, because it now is upgraded to the M4, it has the more robust external display support.
Yeah, Thunderbolt 5 ports.
Yeah.
4, I'm sorry, Thunderbolt 4, not 5.
Yeah, so Thunderbolt 4 on the MacBook Air.
So you can run 3 displays, two external and the open display of the Air itself.
Yeah, so there's no more of that clamshell compromise that you had to do with the M3.
Yeah, I don't know how many MacBook Air users are doing that, but if you want to, it's there. It's good. Thunderbolt 4 is basically Thunderbolt 3 with better display support. I think, Jason, you can correct me if I'm wrong there, but I think otherwise, like transfer speeds and charging speeds, like they're basically the same.
God, I think it's mostly about displays with 4.
Yeah, right. I think the transfer speeds, like otherwise it'll be the same. Apple didn't have to do that either. Like that's a nice little quality of life improvement if you want to run an extra couple displays.
Yeah, and there is actually one more major change with the MacBook Air. They introduced a sky blue color, and they got rid of the space gray color.
Listen, we wrote an article and we'll salute space gray. It served us well, but the midnight color is better than space gray.
Yeah.
The best space gray Apple ever made was the iMac Pro, which was almost black, but not quite, and it looked really slick. Otherwise, you never knew what you were going to get. It was either light or dark, and some lights it looked silver. Like, just get the midnight. If you want a dark one, get midnight. But that blue color looks nice.
It's not for me. I don't like those kind of pastel-y colors, but yeah, I can see why people like it. Midnight does, like you said, it's almost black. There's a tinge of blue in it in bright light. Like you can just see this like slight blueness to it, but it's close enough that that's what I would get.
There was a rumor way, way back, like years ago, by John Prosser that Apple was going to release these iMac-like colors in the MacBook Air. And this was one of them. So I guess maybe that rumor was true and Apple just never decided to release them until now. It was like, I want to say like green, blue, and like maybe pink or something, or gold. I forget. But this was one of orange. It's like ultra light blue. So it's it's good to have a little bit of color. It's been so long since Apple offered anything other than like silver and something dark and maybe gold. So this is cool. Not to see it in person. It looks very, very light on the website. Curious to see what it looks like in person.
That iMac Pro Space Gray was the best because it looked kind of like a smoked.
Yeah, it was like
gray,
it looked powerful.
Yeah,
if a color could look powerful, it looked like a really impressive machine.
Right. Yeah. Like this is a serious machine that does serious business stuff. This is not a toy.
Yeah, so that basically covers it for the new releases.
Well, you forgot the big part of the MacBook Air is that it's $100 cheaper.
Oh, that's true. Right. That's a good point. It is $100 cheaper.
The M2 is gone. They got rid of the older one that they sold, and now they cut the price of the entry level M4 MacBook Air to $999, which is super impressive. Like, I'm not a Windows guy, but I'm going to venture that for $1,000, you're not going to get anything that competes with the screen, the chip, and the OS that the MacBook Air brings for $999. It's fantastic.
That would be debatable, but it's a better deal for sure, right?
Yeah.
Oh, the Windows bit. Yeah, no, I know. Like I said, I don't know what I'm talking about. But to get a Mac for under $1,000 with a new processor, a new design and Retina screen, all that stuff, like that's just unheard of.
Well, for $1,000, like, let's not give them credit for one.
Well,
yeah,
sure, Amazon will be selling it for $850.
Yeah, that's true. You do see some deals on MacBook Airs on occasion where $50 off, $100 off,
200.
That'll be good. Yeah, you get a couple more CPU cores.
It'll be $800. Yeah.
The jump up from M3 to M4, it goes up to a 10-core CPU and all the other stuff that's generally faster. You can get more memory than you used to in the Air. You used to go to 24. Now you can get 24 or 30s too, and they all start at 16. You're still going to want to pay the extra money for more storage. 256, unless you're buying another laptop in a year. If you're going to plan to hang on to this thing, you're going to want more than 256. As the storage is still the part where you need
16 gigs of RAM.
Yeah, that's okay for
$200 before, so it's really like a $300 price cut. So it's
yeah, it's weird. They did that thing in the middle where they just kind of updated. They got rid of all the 8 gig Macs. They just bumped them all to 16. Had they not done that, it would have been an even bigger jump.
It's nice to know now that the most affordable Mac is not an old Mac anymore.
Right.
In the past.
For sure. Absolutely.
Yeah. That M2, it's a good machine. I mean, people like us who are kind of, deep into this know that's an older machine. And maybe a general consumer wouldn't actually know that or even care.
True. No, it's true. You don't have to even worry about comparing things anymore. Like this is just the newest generation, the cheapest model. It's something like the iPhone 16e, where it has the same chip and RAM. It supports all the new stuff. It'll get updates for 5 to 7 years, but you're missing out on a couple of smaller features like the GPU cores, and really, I guess that's it, right? Otherwise, it's the same. Yeah, it's just the GPU cores that are different in that model.
That just about wraps it up for this episode of the Macworld Podcast. We have more information on all the new products on macworld.com. That does it for this episode 924. Thanks to Jason Cross.
Thank you.
Thanks to Michael Simon.
Thank you, sir.
And thanks to you, the audience. Thank you for tuning in. You can subscribe to the Macworld Podcast in the podcast app, on Spotify, or through any other podcast app. Do you have any comments or questions? Send us an email at podcast@macworld.com or contact us through Blue Sky, Facebook, or Threads. Just search for Macworld and look for the Blue Mouse logo. Join us for the next episode of the Macworld Podcast as we talk about the latest in the world of Apple. See you next time.